Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be going over organic molecules. This is like the last section of our chemistry of life notes, or some people call them the molecules of life because the organic molecules are what make up you and I and why we need to study it. All right, so we are going to go over the large compounds containing carbon. That's what the definition is of organic molecules. We'll go over the big four: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. When trying to remember the difference between organic compounds and inorganic compounds, organic compounds, again, they're large, they're carbon containing. That's pretty much kind of what like defines them. They also probably will also have hydrogen, oxygen, and maybe nitrogen, sulfur, and like phosphorus. Okay. All right. So maybe you've had these notes before. We started with carbohydrates. Remember, you can fast forward to whatever section you need to get those notes. Carbohydrates. When you think of carbohydrates, I try to think of like organic chemistry. By the way, it's different than organic produce. In a grocery store, organic produce would be things that don't contain as many pesticides or things that are harmful for your body. In chemistry, organic actually means anything that's like long carbon chains that could be produced by maybe something that's alive. Okay, could be, but at least or behaves like a molecule that could be produced by something that's alive. Um, so inorganic. I guess you want to talk about inorganic first. Remember, inorganic was small, like the opposite, and they didn't usually have carbon, or at least didn't have carbon chains. So inorganics were like water, CO2. Even though it has carbon, it is not a long carbon chain. There's no hydrogen in there. Any kind of gases like nitrogen gas, oxygen gas, also salts. Yep, like NaCl, any kind of ions, metals, any of those kinds of trace elements like that are not the long carbon chains. Okay, so we're talking about molecules of life. We talk about like things. Think of things that you eat, like carbohydrates, lipids or fats, protein, and then you're not cognizant of it, but anytime you're eating things with cells, you're eating nucleic acids. So maybe you can think of when you think of carbohydrates, you can think of like a piece of bread or something like that. Yeah, is that a piece of bread? Okay. Yeah, there's a crust. Yeah, I don't know why I'm trying to draw today, but it's not working out. Lipids might be like butter, anything that could be liquid oil or solid oil. So maybe like draw a cube of butter in your notes. Protein, anything that is meat. All right. Other things too, like some avocados might have protein in it, but maybe draw a little chicken leg. Yeah, this is where art classes would have been really good for me. Yeah, don't really have that. Okay. Uh, so yeah, turkey, chicken, beef, pork, anything like that. Nucleic acids, in the cells. They're in the middle of the cells. In fact, the nucleus that we're going to talk about. And so anything with cells, like eggs would be protein, but inside the eggs you would have the double helix of our nucleic acids here. So we just usually do like a spiral with a staircase and be like, that's DNA. All right, we're going to talk about DNA, RNA, and other nucleic acid molecules at the end, starting with carbohydrates. So then carbos. We love our carbos. What are they? They're mostly supposed to be a source of energy, not just, fun eating and pleasure. Yeah. Source of carbon, though, to make your like basic building blocks, to make other molecules. You do need carbon in cellular respiration. What are they made out of? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And generally, two hydrogens for every one oxygen and one carbon. So it's carbohydrate. So it's like that's water, kind of like, but it's not at all like water. But I guess you could use water molecules to make it. We're going to string these in long chains, though, of course. So think of like glucose, our favorite. because you can really use glucose for cellular respiration. C6H12. Oh, wow. I just did C and then O. That's funny how I would do that. Always put the carbon first when listing molecules, and then we usually put the hydrogen next. That's different than acids where we put the hydrogen first. Okay. C6H12O6. All right, that's your glucose. Right? Glucose is listed as a monomer. That means it's a single sugar unit. If you chop it up after that, it ceases to become sugar. It's not a saccharide anymore. So, and most of the time, you would link these together. So, glucose is a monosaccharide. By the way, yeah, monomer. So I guess monomer is a good word to know. I think that's how you spell it. Saccharides, single sugars, simple sugars, and we talked about glucose already. That's this, by the way. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon sugar, and it's linked in this way with an oxygen that way and some other oxygens other places. And yeah, it is a polar molecule because oxygen's partially negatively charged. That's why sugar dissolves in water. We also have fructose, which is found in most fruit. And yeah, it is a component of corn syrup. Like corn syrup has a lot of fructose. We call it high fructose corn syrup. But the difference between the fructose and the glucose is a 6 carbon sugar and fructose is a 5 carbon sugar. So we call that glucose a hexose for the 6 carbons. And then fructose, galactose, and and ribose and deoxyribose. These are all pentoses. Those are 5 carbon sugars. And they'll make a penthouse instead of a hexagon. Okay. Does that sound familiar though? Ribose and deoxyribose? Yeah. Those are the sugars, the 2 different types of sugars that are in your RNA and your DNA. So they make other things. So your carbohydrates can make other things. And if they do, we'll call them the nucleic acids. But so ribose are in the ribonucleic acids, and deoxyribose is in the deoxyribonucleic acids. Okay, DNA. We don't say dRNA. As I'm saying it, I'm writing it down. Okay, cool. We are going to talk about disaccharides. Di means 2. So these are 2 monomers put together, right? So let's just make sure we remind ourselves that's the di of the saccharides. By the way, saccharin, if something's saccharin, it's sweet. So that's why we get that word saccharide. We also call like table sugar dextrose. By the way, dextrose didn't make it on there. So sorry. And these are double sugars. They do need to be digested down into monosaccharides in order for your body to use them for energy and molecules and stuff like that. Let's see. Dextrose is table sugar, and that is, I believe, 2 glucoses. Oh, I forgot to look that up. Hang on. Sucrose is a glucose plus a fructose. A lactose is a glucose plus a galactose. And a maltose, I can't remember what a maltose is, but that's okay. We're going to be putting these together and we're going to be taking them apart when you do the metabolism, and they taste a slight bit different. It might take a tiny bit more energy to break it down. Here, that's right. I don't have a picture of it. For example, maybe you have like this 6 carbon sugar and it's attached to your 5 carbon sugar in a certain kind of configuration too. Okay, so that might be your sucrose or something like that. Let me see if I looked it up somewhere else. I don't think I did. All right, so oligosaccharide. So a little bit bigger than a disaccharide. In fact, it's the next level, kind of 3 to 20 little monomer units, okay? These are mostly used in functioning intercell membranes as an ID card, like antigens, we call them. These are the chemical ID card that make you, or at least tell others that you are you, like a license plate. And if it doesn't get recognized by your own cells as you, they're going to try to mark it for destruction with antibodies that will bind what we call antigens, right? Somebody else's blood comes into your blood and it doesn't have the right kind of markers. It's gonna attack that blood. That's why you have to have like AB. If you have AB, you can only accept certain other types of blood, maybe A or B. And there's other stuff for that too. We'll study that later. By the way, lactose. Remember we talked about lactose being glucose plus galactose. Yeah, you need lactose to digest it, to break that bond. That's why if you're lactose intolerant, it's so bad, because you can't really use that sugar, and then the bacteria in your gut that can use it overgrows, and then you get immune problems with that. Maybe you get intestinal problems, and needs lactase. That's that enzyme to digest or break that bond. And you don't want extra sugar in your gut, because then the bad bacteria loves to grow. Oh, glucose plus glucose is table sugar. Yeah. All right. So going back to oligosaccharides, that ID card, number 3 or more, up to 20, maybe an oligosaccharide that antibodies can bind to. Poly means many. So a polysaccharide is like a whole bunch. It could be much longer chains of glucose monomers. They're bonded together in different ways. Okay, so here's some polysaccharides. This one's fun. Starch. Sound familiar? Yeah, they're branched chains of glucose. They're generally found in plants. So starchy plants like potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, anything that's kind of got a little bit of a starchier nature to it. Maybe sweet potato, yams, pumpkin, kind of squashes. Okay. When we eat the plants, when we eat the plants, okay, when we eat plants, we have enzymes, and that's their job to break down the bonds in the starch and release that glucose into your bloodstream, or release the monomers into your bloodstream. It may not be all glucose, but sugars. Okay, the next type is glycogen. Glycogen is more of the animal storage molecule. Same idea though. Different types of bonds though. Highly branched, again, types of glucose. We talked about it in your blood sugar regulation, I think. So it's found in animals as a storage molecule for when we have a bunch of glucose around and we want to get it out of our system, but our body doesn't need it right away. We store the glycogen in our liver and our muscles. So if you're in good shape, you're going to have a lot of glycogen in your muscles and ready to break down if you are exercising a lot and you're going to need some extra quick energy, right? Oh, by the way, when you eat starches, like wheat is another starch. It comes from a plant. The job of the digestion, it actually starts in your mouth, and then it keeps going in other parts of your small intestine and stuff, and it'll be amylase. Amylase will be a starch that you probably secrete in your saliva as you're chewing it, and then it'll break it down. So actually starches, including like wheat and stuff like that, will taste more sweet the more you chew them. Okay, back to glycogen. Glycogen, when your blood sugar starts to drop, when the glucose is gone, the pancreas will secrete the hormone glucagon, and the glucagon goes into the blood, travels to the liver, tells the liver and muscles to break down some of the glycogen and secrete glucose into the blood, thus maintaining blood sugar levels and homeostasis. So that's one part of the blood sugar regulation. If we never use our glycogen, by the way, they're going to be converted to fats, lipids, which is another type of storage molecule for energy. And yeah, it's pretty efficient. It doesn't weigh as much for the amount that it actually creates for energy. Okay, so another type of polysaccharide is cellulose. Okay, not cellulite. Cellulite is just one word for fat in human. All right, cellulose is what makes bark, what makes the woody part of the plants. Okay, so basically, wood fiber. And the part about that, there's straight chains, by the way, just different bonds. Okay, we can't break them down. They're produced in plants so that plants can have cell walls, so that plants can be have like structure because they don't have bones, so they need something to hold them up, and makes bark, and it makes the woody part of the plants. We call it dietary fiber if we're eating it, and it's really good for you, even though we can't digest it. We do not have enzymes to digest it, so we can't use it for energy. But it's really good for you. It's good for your large intestine because it kind of cleans it out and it makes it exercise and work well, and it doesn't, just gets all the junk out. So it also can slow down your gut if your gut's a little fast. So it's good for regulating. But here's the deal: cows, pigs, chickens, everything like that, they eat the cellulose and they get the energy from it, right? You're like, cows eat grass. Why can't we eat grass? Well, it'll make us sick for some, but also celery. Like we don't get any energy from celery. You might get some molecules that are good to use, so maybe a tiny bit of mineral and salts and vitamin maybe. But a lot of veggies don't have a ton of starch in them. But if they have cellulose, bacteria can break it down. So in animal stomachs, they actually have that appendix that is active, and it keeps a good supply of bacteria all the time. They call it a cecum in some cases, right off the large intestine, beginning of the large intestine, and it's good for them. It makes energy for cows, pigs, chickens, herbivores. So then they can do their metabolism, but it does take a while. So this is why herbivores' intestines are so much longer, and why they might have more than one stomach, and they might chew for a while longer, and then burp it up, and then chew that stuff that says to get more bacteria kind of in and around it. And you guys, we need the bacteria for vitamins too. Do you know the bacteria? We need good bacteria. So good bacteria, actually, in our gut, we need it. It only really generally eats cellulose. And it makes some amount of vitamins. It makes vitamin K for us, which is good for our blood clotting and other things. And so it makes some of the B vitamins too. And it will help regulate your immune system if you don't have an overgrowth of one type of bacteria, of what we might call bad bacteria that only eats sugars. This type of bacteria you're going to need to feed it veggies. Yeah, every day. Your colon needs it every day. That thing that you heard, yep, we need it every day. Okay, so lipids. Lipids, other name for lipids are fats. Okay, comes in different varieties. Depending on the type of lipid is going to determine the function. They are also long chains of carbon, of course, because it's an organic molecule, and have hydrogen and oxygen. Some have phosphorus in it, as probably phosphate, but there's a lot more hydrogen and carbon than oxygen. So a very little amount of oxygen. Oxygen was what made the sugar molecules kind of polar. So they're not polar because lipids don't really have an even sharing of electrons. They have a lot of carbon. So one type of fat is called true fats or neutral fats. All right. They're made up of one glycerol. It's like a glycerol backbone. It's a 3-carbon backbone, and 3 fatty acids, which are just long chains. Hopefully we'll get that in a second. They're also called triglycerides because of that. Not because we have 3 glycerol, but because off the glycerol, there's 3 fatty acids. So there's some fats that don't have all 3 fatty acids. But lipids, as far as their function, is energy storage. It's a lot lighter than proteins or even sugars for the amount of ATP that we can make. Oh, didn't need that apparently. Okay, so function, energy storage is one function. And we store it as adipose tissue. That's what we were talking about. We were talking about cellulite. And it's usually between the skin and the muscles. Okay, it's going to pad, it's going to be a shock absorber for organs, especially the kidneys and abdominal organs. Remember, they don't have bones surrounding them, which is nice because then your belly can grow. You can be pregnant, and but yeah, hopefully you'll use all that fun fat. Also, your eyes need it. Your eyes need fat in order to work for your eyeballs. Yeah, you need fat. We'll talk about it soon enough. You need fat. They used to tell people, oh, don't eat fat. It's bad for you. Actually, it's really good for you. You just want to make sure you're eating a good ratio of fats. You super need fats. Okay, this is a molecule of fat right here. This is the true fats with the glycerol backbone, with that 3-carbon glycerol. And from it, the 3 fatty acids with a little bit of oxygen in between. But you can see there's not like clearly oxygen at one end and other stuff at the other end. So it is non-polar, especially this guy right here. This one, as pictured, is a saturated fat. Every carbon atom is bonded to the maximum number of 4 other atoms. There's no double bonds. So it's considered saturated with hydrogen. In other words, as much hydrogen as possible on each carbon. At room temperature, then, these are also often solids. They tend to be found in animals, so like animal fats. And animal foods like beef, pork, eggs, yolks, cheese, chicken. Yeah. Also found in palm and coconut oils. Okay, so saturated fats, but they're not all bad for you, okay? A lot of times in these saturated fats, there's some essential fatty acids. Essential means we can't make them. We're not making it. We can't make it, but we need it. So, for example, in a lot of animal fats and some palm and coconut, maybe, but mostly animal, is omega fatty acid 6. I'll just write omega 6. You need that. You just don't want to have too much of it and not enough of the other stuff. Okay. The other type of fat, of course, you probably guessed it, unsaturated fats. And there's a lot of double covalent bonds between them, between the carbons. So they carry less than the maximum number of 4 other atoms bonded to it. And this causes a kink in the line. Here, I'll just do a little example on the end here. If this carbon doesn't have a single bond to the other carbon next to it and instead has a double bond, it's going to not have that hydrogen, but also it's going to change the geometry. Well, I guess this hydrogen is the hydrogen it wouldn't have. It probably would have that one. And it'll be at a different angle, and it'll be at like a bent angle. And then, of course, the rest of the carbon chain would continue, right? So they don't lie next to each other nicely to make a solid. It's interrupted. They're actually liquids at room temperature usually. And they come from usually plants, mainly found in plants. As you can see, though, corn oil, okay, sunflower oil, fish oil, that's one thing. It's not, yeah, fish are not a plant, but they happen to be high in omega fatty acid of these, high in unsaturated. Also, like nuts, sunflower, olive seeds, stuff like that, flax oil. I'm just trying to tell you all these kind of, yeah. All right, so a lot of these are high in omega 6, or sorry, omega 3, my bad. Omega fatty acid 3, super helpful because you need it for anti-inflammation. All right, you need 3, you need 6. You also need 9, by the way. Palm and coconut, I think, definitely coconut. Avocado, that's what I'm trying to think here. Avocado has omega 9, or at least more omega 9. And you're going to need that too. you just want to make sure you have a balance between 6, 9, and 3, because your body, if it has too much 6, for example, because you've been eating a lot of fried foods, if they were fried in butter, yeah, I'm afraid, yeah, cheese, butter, then you're going to have, your body's going to try to get rid of the oils in it, and it can't distinguish between omega-3, 6, and 9. It just gets rid of all of it. That makes you very low on omega-3. So eat a balanced diet. That's all. And if you're not getting enough omega-3, take omega-3 supplements, I guess. Maybe you're not eating a lot of flax, but you're going to eat flax pills. Or maybe you're allergic to nuts and fish. And I'm allergic to shellfish, but that's okay. Yeah, I resemble that remark. The sometimes unsaturated fats are changed to saturated fats to make it taste better. They used to do that. Not so much anymore. I think it's actually illegal. Trans fats, or at least they have to tell you if they have it in there. It was when they messed with it to try to make it, saturated to kind of, so it lasted longer apparently. But unfortunately, they linked it to atherosclerosis, and that's going to lead to plaques that are going to cause heart attack. By the way, let me jump on this soapbox. Clogging of arteries, yeah, plaques does that. But the reason why it does that is because there is inflammation in your system and your body's trying to create band-aids. That's all. Plaques are band-aids because maybe you're low on omega-3 and you're getting inflammation, and your blood vessel lining, when it gets inflamed, it kind of leaks a little bit of blood and plasma, and that's not good. And your body says, oh no, there's a bleed somewhere. Quick, make more plaques. Your body actually makes plaques, which is made out of cholesterol. Your body actually makes cholesterol, and it serves as a Band-Aid. But unfortunately, there's no stopping it if it just keeps going. The inflammation, maybe the stress, lack of exercise, inflammation for one reason or another. And then you get clogged arteries because of that. Now that when you have a heart attack, they don't tell you to cut out the fats. They put you on the Mediterranean diet that's high in olive oil and omega-3s and maybe seafoods. Yeah. So what we think have totally changed due to people getting heart disease and studying it, finally figuring out what was wrong. Okay, so another type of fat, so another reason why we need lipids, will be a phospholipid. So it's a phosphorus group on the lipid, but it only has 2 fatty acids. Oh, I think I put an extra T in there. Well, I just dropped and ruined my thing, so I don't think it'll be too much of a deal here. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way. Okay, fatty acid chains and phosphate group. Yeah. So instead of having that third chain on that third spot on the glycerol, it's got a phosphorus as a phosphate. All right. So here's a representation of it. This would be the glycerol, and then the glycerol would have the phosphorus, which is a little negatively charged. Yeah, a little electronegative. Then you get the uneven electron sharing. So this is kind of a polar molecule, but it has such a long fatty acid non-polar tail that it's like both. This is the polar head and this is the non-polar tail. So we kind of write it like that. What is its function? It's the structural unit of our cell membranes. Yeah. That double layer of phospholipid is called the phospholipid bilayer. Does that ring a bell? And it's very important to have that because we need to be polar on the watery side. So here, there's a polar head, and polar on the inside of the cell. But then the non-polar legs, they all sort of face each other. This is a very oversimplification of your phospholipid bilayer membrane. And of course, this happens in a large sphere all around, and it's polar and everywhere except for the middle of this layer. So it keeps a lot of molecules from coming through. They have to be really tiny molecules, like maybe water, to get through. Or if they're non-polar molecules, like steroids, like cholesterol or something like that, they might be able to get through. So it's important. Fat's important. Lipids are important. Another type of fat that's really important is myelin, and it's another phospholipid. And it's a fatty insulation that covers all of our nerves. Yeah, nerves have its polarization, depolarization, and it needs to happen locally. It's just kind of like wires that need insulation so that the signal doesn't get branched off, like that their nerve signal goes all the way down to that nerve and to where it's supposed to go. We don't want to short circuit that. Just like wires need plastic or rubber, plastic, rubber insulation, we need it too. Okay. And if you're not getting enough fats in your diet, you can't make this myelin. Or or if you're getting a lot of inflammation and you get a lot of autoimmune problems, then your body starts attacking the myelin or maybe harvesting it to use it elsewhere. You lose the myelin on your nerves. Your nerves cannot tell your muscles to contract for number one. Also, you might get depressed and you might have trouble like fuzzy headed thinking. The name for it when the myelin on the nerves that go to muscular, they go to your muscles, the neuromuscular nerves, is multiple sclerosis. And it's characterized by getting lesions near the nerve tissue, but that's how they can like recognize it on X-ray. But they usually kind of like get like muscle spasms, maybe, and muscle weakness, and eventually you will lose the ability to walk if that keeps going. So omega fatty acid 3, fat's good. Your cholesterol. Now, some people are like, wait a minute, but my cholesterol level was really high. That's dangerous if it's too high. Well, there's probably a reason why it's high. It's probably, if you have inflammation, if you can figure out why. But your liver's making it. All right. Remember, cholesterol could be the plaque band-aids that are in your system, which you're going to need. If you have a bleed, yeah. But cholesterol is a molecule, a lipid molecule, made up of 4 carbon-carbon rings. Liver makes it. We also get it from foods that we eat. We could eat from beef, pork, milk products, egg yolks, etc. And here's a picture of it. Is 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the rings in here, and you're like, but wait a minute, isn't that a lot like sugar? No, oxygen. Yeah, these aren't like that. And there's like some cyclic ring nature, which you'll learn in other organic chemistry classes. And then here's a nice long carbon chain there. So cholesterol forms part of also your cell membrane. Like there are chunks of cholesterol molecules, a piece of cholesterol molecules in your cell membranes. Oh, I should make that. That's okay. I'm just trying to use different colors. And what it does is it repels water and it makes the cells water resistant. Otherwise, we might lose or gain water too quickly. We're not waterproof. Water still wanders, but this cholesterol is going to repel a lot of the water. All right. And then water has to find a channel to get in or out so your body can control it. Cholesterol is used also by the ovaries and testes to produce steroid hormones like estrogen and testosterone. There's other steroid hormones in your body. Other hormones are protein, but these ones are steroid, like corticosteroids, stuff like that. A form of cholesterol found in your skin, actually, as vitamin D. Yeah, that's how you can make it. Basically, you have to take that vitamin D and convert it to D3, the active form of vitamin D. And this has to happen with sunlight, guys. We were kind of adapted to be out in the sun, and when we don't, bad things happen. We need vitamin D to absorb calcium in our diet. So we need calcium to keep our bones healthy, and we need the calcium in our bones so we can mobilize it so our muscles can function. But also need calcium for people who are growing. Kids are growing. That's why they do more of their growing in the summertime. They're getting a lot more sunlight. Milk has vitamin D3 in it, but a lot of people don't have lactose to digest it. So it might cause some tummy problems. In the wild, where do animals get their milk from? They get it from minerals, maybe in water, but veggies primarily. Veggies will have milk in them, or calcium in them, I should say, not milk. And then, if you eat an animal, the animals store a lot of their calcium in their bones. So that's why soup bones are kind of nice because they have calcium and phosphorus in there. Ooh, I'm afraid that last bit of lipids is up here. Last bit on cholesterol. liver cells use cholesterol to make bile. All right, we need bile. I'm going to make this green because bile is kind of green. Why is bile important? Well, it's used as an emulsifier so that you could absorb the fats. Otherwise, they would just like float and they wouldn't mix. They just keep floating, right? You need it to emulsify so we can break the fats in your diet down. So things that you're eating, in order to get fat, you have to have fat to like mix with it. So bile is stored in your gallbladder, right? It's kind of it's like soap. It's like the soap of your system. One end is more polar and the other end is non-polar. So it kind of marries the fat molecule with the water solution because we're very watery. But when it's not yet being used, it's made by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Did I decide that gallbladder had two L's there? Yeah. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about proteins. Are you protein? Yeah, you kind of are. Do you support teens? Well, that too. Proteins, that's the third type of molecule that's considered an organic molecule, and its function is going to be all over the place. It does so many things for you. Its composition, what it's made of, is carbon and hydrogen, of course, or wouldn't be an organic molecule, and oxygen, but also nitrogen. It's the CHON. Proteins are the CHON. There's an N in protein. So maybe you can remember that. Some have sulfur, by the way, which makes those disulfide bonds that we talked about that keep some large, yeah, disulfide, I don't know what I was thinking, keeps those large units of protein together, keeps their structure. There's only about 20 different amino acids. Amino acids, by the way, are the monomer. That link together to make up all human proteins. Right, 20 different combinations. That's a lot of different, though. All right, so those are the monomers of amino acid. Like the simple unit, the basic unit looks like this. An amine group, so it's nitrogen, carbon with a side chain that could vary. These are what the 20 different amino acids have differently. Sometimes it's just a hydrogen. Sometimes it's like a cyclical ring or something, or sulfur. Varies between the 20 amino acids. I'm going to do A period for amino acid. So we're going to link up to make human these amino acids, but we also have this carboxylic group. So if you link an amino acid with another one, that OH and that H are going to leave, and then water, by the way, is given off. That's why this is called dehydration synthesis. You're synthesizing amino acid chains or synthesizing proteins, and it's going to bind to the nitrogen next to it, which has the carbon with the side group, and then the carbon with the carboxylic group, or the double bond oxygen. Kind of turns it into a ketone, I guess. I don't know. And then this one will bond to that carboxylic group, and then the carbon with the R chain, and you get the idea, right? So that's how each amino acid is bonded to each other. That happens when we do protein synthesis, okay? So primary structure of proteins are these amino acid chains. By the way, your body can only make 11 of the amino acids. You have to eat the other 9. Yeah. Or you basically starve, or you're under malnourished and you'll have a whole bunch of problems because you need it. All right, so just the amino acid chains, these could be any one of 20, and each one of these, linking them together, depending on the R groups, is going to depend on how those like to sit next to each other. Either like to make swirls for alpha helixes, or they like to make these rows, like a typewriter, I guess, and they line up like in these sheets. Okay, and those are called the secondary protein structure, right? Primary is the sequence itself. Secondary are those lining up there. Maybe they have hydrogen bonds and stuff like that. Yeah. And then those sheets or alpha helices they go in a row. They're going to form like a glop. We call that tertiary protein structure. And maybe you're going to have hydrogen bonds here. And then quaternary structure, that's going to be more than one glop of these big tertiary proteins. Okay. Some of these are held together. Some of these bonds might be disulfide bridges. But also hydrogen bonds. And yeah, acid, heat, it's going to interfere with these bonds and it's going to cause these strands to not be attracted to each other anymore. It's going to interrupt the structures. They're going to unfold. Protein may consist of a lot of protein, a lot of amino acid monomers, or very little. So protein might be 1 to 33,000 amino acids in humans. I think there's like a frog protein that's like got 1,000,000 or something. It's like, yeah, not normal for humans. So yeah, the order of amino acids is so important. Most of it's important. Some of it could probably give or take, but it's determined by our DNA. Let's pick so DNA, we're going to talk about later, is a nucleic acid. Our genetic code codes for the amino acid. Just drop it right center. So those are instructions for making proteins. We have two types of proteins. We have fibrous proteins, and then we have globular proteins. So fibrous proteins, we also call them scleroproteins. And just think structure, scleroprotein structure. You won't need to learn scleroproteins, but think of structural. They are alpha helices, by the way, usually. They add support and strength to body tissues. They're the building materials of your body. Yeah, you're mostly made out of protein. Fibrous proteins include collagen. Collagen's found in all animal tissue from blood to bone. Yeah, and these fibers are most abundant protein in your body. So if you're going to say what type of protein that's most abundant, collagen is. You remember that we talked about skin? Yeah, these fibers are usually supple and resilient and abundant in bone. Yep, your bone structures, protein. It's the minerals that make it hard, but still, we wouldn't be able to have the minerals if you didn't have the protein. Blood vessels are made out of protein, and like ligaments, tendons, you get the idea. Also, skin, the outer leathery portion. And yeah, your body needs to maintain these alpha helices, and I hear like vitamin C helps maintain those alpha helices so that the collagen will stay abundant and hopefully help your skin out. Next one is keratin. Keratin protects. It's found in hair and nails. So yeah, you have the nerve endings in the bottom and ends of your fingers would be too sensitive. So nails kind of protect that. Your hair, I don't know, mostly insulation. Keep your heat loss down because you lose heat from your head. Keratin, by the way, is also what calluses are made out of. Yeah, your cells will start producing keratin fibers if it's rubbing too much. Another form of protein is elastin. These are often found along with collagen, where you need durability and flexibility. Yeah, like elastic. So that's why they call it elastin. Like blood vessels, they need to be able to handle blood pressure, especially your arteries, big time elastin, because they need to handle every time the heart beats, they kind of expand a little and slap back to their original form, we hope. We don't want them to tear, right? And the dermis of your skin. You don't want your skin to tear. You need it to be a little stretchy. This is kind of also what you lose a little bit in as you age. Your elasticity kind of decreases. Another type of fibrous protein are actin and myosin. They actually are all functional too. They make up your muscle cells, the fibers in your muscle cells, and they interact with each other, and they are what causes the cell to shorten. or contract. And the actin and myosin actually slide past each other when it's time to contract. We'll learn more about that later when we do the muscular system. Now, the globular proteins, these are functional. Okay, we talked about the scleroproteins and talked about just fibrous proteins, but these are the structural or the functional, excuse me. We talked about getting late. All right, so globular proteins, they're functional. They're also called spheroproteins because they are in globs or spheres, hence the word globular. These are the ones that do things. They tend to be spherical, three-dimensional, shaped and round, and they play roles in almost all biological processes. They have hydrogen bonds, like we were talking about in the structure, and that's what holds the proteins together. These bonds can be broken by heat, and it decreases pH, technically increase of pH too much. So just, you got to make sure that you don't do that because otherwise it'll interfere with hydrogen bonds and it'll render the protein useless. This is called denatured. It's why if you put lemon juice in your milk, the proteins in the milk are going to denature and they actually turn more solid and you get the clumps, aka curdled milk. Also, I guess bacteria is going to metabolize it in curdled milk too, and bacteria creates a little bit of acid, so maybe that's probably what does it too. I don't know. But homeostasis of the body, temperature and blood pH, so important. Okay, globular proteins, they do everything. They're the functional unit of your body, and you need them to survive. Now, this says some hormones. I don't know why I've left that as that. Really, it's most hormones help regulate many bodily functions, like blood sugar, for example, and growth, development, any kind of regulation. Most of your hormones, from your thyroid releasing hormone down to insulin, are protein. Hemoglobin is another type of functional globular protein. The heme, it means iron, right? So it does work in conjunction with iron, like a lot of enzymes do. Honestly, they work with a metal, maybe. And hemoglobin, remember, it's the protein that's found in red blood cells, and it's what transports the O2 in your blood. Technically, CO2 isn't transferred as much, and that's good. You don't want your hemoglobin to like CO2 too much. CO2 is mostly transported in the bloodstream, dissolved. Another type of globular protein are the antibodies. These proteins are part of your immune response. Yeah, they recognize and activate invaders. So the antibodies are what bind to those oligosaccharide antigens, right? Or whatever is on the surface of viruses or bacteria. Antibodies are what's going to mark it for destruction, and maybe they'll impair it and keep it from even infecting your cells. Hopefully, it'll mark it, and the white blood cells will respond. There's a lot of different responses that we'll talk about when we talk about the immune system. Hopefully, we get rid of the pathogens. Enzymes, yes, that's the last very important protein structure that catalyze or speed up the chemical reactions in your body. And reactions in the body would occur too slowly to sustain life if we didn't have them. Okay, so functional proteins, enzymes especially, are the doers. They don't just transport things just passively and just wander. They actually make chemical reactions occur. They break molecules, they make everything in your body. They do everything, so that's why it's super important. I'm going to say two examples of that. One could be the, what color should we use? Synthesis reaction. We talked about the different types of reactions. Here's the synthesis reaction. By the way, it takes energy to do all of these. That's why we talked about metabolism in your body. It's really all of the chemical reactions, and usually in the form of ATP. So, for example, you have an active site. Yeah, it's pretty active. Well, that's where the molecules will bind that you're trying to join. So, for example, this is a cartoon representation of a spheroprotein, a globular protein. Here's two molecules that should fit. These are because of the R groups that happen to be available on the amino acids. They just happen to, be shown. Taking an ATP to do this. We call this the active site, by the way. That's the site that's active. It's the site that's going to be binding to these guys. And it needs to be available and open here, active site. And we call the things that are being bonded together as the substrates. Substrates. Forgot the R. All right, so what happens? They bind. Conformational change is what happens when the both are bind. That signals, oh yeah, ATP come in, and then when ATP is used, then the protein kind of maybe like unfolds or whatever folds or whatever you want to say. It moves around, and it just enables the linkage to occur between these two guys that are now sitting really close to each other. All right, and then hopefully they've been linked and they release with the releasing of the ATP or the use of ATP. And then you have these two molecules that are linked, I guess. All right, so that's just a really oversimplified representation. This is globular protein, remember? And they've been bound. The enzyme should be available to do it again and again and again and again as long as there's ATP, right? That's an oversimplification of it, but it's pretty close. All right, so we're going to go to decomposition. Same idea, just kind of in reverse. So let's just use different type of little weird looking spaces. So for example, this globular protein has an active site like this, and maybe this is its substrate. Where do I come up with these? I don't know. I didn't. So yeah, just like we had the active site for the synthesis reaction, you have the active site for the decomposition reaction, which I forgot to label. Active site. Well, substrate. Yeah, phooey. Let's call this decomposition. So decomposing means to break down. Okay. Also takes energy and usually in the form of ATP. So here's the binding. Here's the substrate binding. And remember, I don't know if we mentioned this, but this could happen. This reaction could happen. Maybe it happens really slowly. But what enzymes end up doing is catalyze or speeding this up. They lower the activation energy, like this ATP again, probably. And then it'll break and then release the ATP, and you're going to get two separate molecules, okay? And again, the protein is available to do it again. Right? So this is important because you need these active sites available to bind to the next substrate. Yeah, it's not going to work out well if heat or heavy metal, for example, like heavy metal is going to just unwind this guy, so it's going to be like a glop. Yeah, there's no active site, right? That's why changes in pH or hydrogen ion concentration and temperature, especially if it's too hot, they change the structure of the active site. So the active site is no longer available and it can't function. The enzyme can't do its function. Okay. Heavy metals block the active site because they have an affinity and they want to be bound at more than the substrate. So they'll just sit there and block this enzyme's activity. And the worst part is there's such an affinity, they don't let go, even if just one of them is blocked. Yeah. So, and another thing is that the enzyme is never available for it to do any other enzyme activity, and it's kaput. So we want to not, have heavy metals or like metals in the wrong electron state, like copper too is probably bad for you. Lead, mercury, yeah, stuff like that. Heavy metals. Yeah, once you shut down your enzymes, you're going to shut yourself down. Okay, so I'm going to break here and load this video, and then I'm going to actually talk about nucleic acids in a separate video because it's just darn long. All right, thank you for joining us thus far, and see you soon, okay?